Chapter 8:16. Dean, I understand. His face was filled with excitement and emotion. Whether it was the blood test or the blood transfusion to save people, it was like a new window had been opened, allowing Yuan Heping to see a new world. He could even assert that once the blood transfusion to save people worked, who knew how many people would benefit and how many people would be saved from the brink of death? Of course, all of these procedures had to be up to standard. Only when there were no problems would it be considered saving people. Otherwise, it would be harming people. In the ward, Xianxia was lying peacefully. After the fresh blood entered his body, his condition was much better than before. At least, there was more color on his face. This made Xiaowei, who had been accompanying him, extremely excited. When she saw that it was the sixth young master who had entered the ward, she hurriedly stood up in a panic and wanted to kneel on the ground to thank him. Yang Chendong was quick to react. He blocked the kneeling knee and shook his head gently. Don't thank me. I should be thanking Xianxia. If it wasn't for him, I'm afraid I would be a dead man. No, the sixth young master is invincible. Even God is afraid of you. He would never dare to accept you. Xiaowei was shocked when she heard Yang Chendong's words of gratitude. As a servant, shouldn't it be his duty to protect the master? How could he deserve a word of thanks? Yang Chendong did not explain anything. Instead, he carefully observed Xia's condition. When he found that everything had stabilized, he was relieved. After comforting him for a while, he left the ward. Outside, Beta Persei, Yang San, Yang Lu, Qiu Vi, Dao Xiao, and the others were all looking at him as if they were looking at a god. They had all seen Xia's injuries, especially Qiu Vi. As the first person besides Yang Chendong to see the injuries, his first thought was that brother Xianxia was definitely going to die. Although it was difficult for him to accept the news and he was very sad, there were always deaths when looking for a fight. To be able to die protecting the sixth young master was originally a very glorious thing. However, he never expected that he would be saved. Although he was still in a coma, didn't Yuan Heping say that he had lost a lot of blood? It was just excessive blood loss, nothing serious. It was only a matter of time before he woke up. A person who had been stabbed so many times that the bones in his back were exposed. His entire body had long been dyed red with blood. Even a person who was called by the king of hell could be saved alive. At this moment, this only increased their respect for the sixth young master. If they followed such a person, what else did they have to worry about? What else did they have to worry about? Seeing a few pairs of eyes looking at him with admiration, Yang Chendong coughed softly. He took this opportunity to teach these tough men who killed without blinking on the battlefield a lesson. Do you see? This is the importance of knowledge. In the future, when you face doctors, teachers, and some scientific researchers, you have to be more polite. Sometimes, bravery alone is useless. Brains and knowledge play an especially important role. Yes, we understand. Beta Persei and the others nodded in agreement. Yang Chendong was just taking this opportunity to improve the status of a cultured person. If a country wanted to develop, it was not enough to rely on strong military force. Cultivating both civil and military skills was the long-term way. Okay, Xianxia should be fine. You don't have to stay here. Go do whatever you need to do. Yes, young master. Jin Ying is still detained by us in the village. How do you want to deal with her? Beta Persei nodded repeatedly. Then, he thought of the representatives of Baiming and became angry. At the beginning of the battle, Baiming could have saved her, but they did not. No matter how they dealt with Jin Ying now, it would not be too much. I'll take care of his matters myself. You just have to accompany me later. Of course, Yang Chendong was aware of what had happened at the scene. Although he had been in the carriage to save people, he was equally aware of what had happened outside. Beta Persei had just finished speaking when Yang San continued, Young master, our security bureau has not done well this time. I have already ordered the removal of the current director of the security bureau of Baiming from his position in the capital. He will be brought back to Qiqian City for investigation. At the same time, I also sent someone to the scene to investigate and confirmed that the person behind the assassination was hiding in a house 300 meters away from the scene. It was only because he retreated quickly that he escaped first. Now, our people have already caught up. Although we may not be able to catch the murderer, it is still possible to find out the true identity of the culprit based on these clues. This time, the Security Bureau had not received any news beforehand. It was true that they had not done their job well. But when he thought about it, wasn't he too careless? He had thought that Jin Ying would negotiate with him on behalf of Baiming, so he could sit back and relax. He had lost the vigilance that he should have. Even when he entered the capital, he did not bring enough armed forces with him. In the end, 9 of his brothers were killed. He was also responsible for this. Even if he was responsible, Yang Chendong did not want to blame others. He did not want to do such a thing that was already lenient to others, so after listening to Yang San's report, he waved his hand. I won't ask what the Security Bureau wants to do this time. In short, we must find the real culprit. We can't let our 9 brothers die in vain. Yes, young master, don't worry. They won't be able to escape. Yang San was grateful that Yang Chendong did not reprimand him, but at the same time, he made up his mind that he would not retreat until he found the real culprit. Even if the Security Bureau had to pay the price, he would accept it. Alright, you guys go do your own things. Qiu Vi, Dao Xiao, you guys do your job well at the memorial service. I will attend it personally. Beta Persei, let's go. Yang Chendong reached out and patted Captain Qiu Vi's shoulder, then turned and left. Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao, who were left behind, were extremely excited. Although the 9 brothers who had died protecting the 6th young master, this was their duty. Compared to the soldiers from other divisions, regiments, and battalions who had to fight for military merits on the battlefield, their treatment was better and their conditions were better. With this, no one would regret their deaths. Instead, it was a kind of glory. Didn't the 6th young master say that he would attend the memorial service personally? This was giving face to his brothers. Based on this, if something similar were to happen in the future, how could he worry that his brothers would not do their best? Qiu Vi and the others were still feeling emotional and moved when Yang Chendong, accompanied by Beta Persei, arrived at the negotiation room in the academy. When the door was pushed open, they saw Chief Eunuch Jin Ying and Commander Lu Gui of the Brocade Guard with bitter expressions on their faces. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong appear, they immediately stood up. Jin Ying's expression was even more careful, as if he wanted to smile but did not dare to. As the recorder and a woman, Junko did not ride out of the manor with Beta Persei and the others after knowing that a red signal had appeared in the capital. She did not have the qualifications to do so. The only thing she could do was to stay behind and watch the actions of Jin Ying and the others. In order to prevent these people from causing trouble, the captain of the Langya Special Forces, Tai Hu, personally took action. He set up an array in the room and released his aura that had killed countless people. Even Lu Gui did not dare to move, let alone the others. Not long after, Yang Chendong and the others returned to the manor. Junko also ran over to take a look. She saw the pale Yang Chendong and Yang Si, who had lost too much blood and was barely alive. Just when she thought that brother Yang Si was definitely dead, her classmates in the academy sent her news. He had been saved using a very advanced technology called blood transfusion. Food could be transported, weapons and armor could be transported, and when could even the blood of a person be transported? Filled with curiosity, she went to take a look, and then saw a scene that shocked her. Bags of blood were really sent into Yang Si's body through plastic and transparent tubes. He was actually fine. This incident had a great impact on Junko's heart. She, who had been in the Yang family manor for 2 years, naturally knew a little about the strength of the mercenaries. But just the strength of the military was not surprising. Which dynasty didn't have the strongest army in the world in their hands? But what really caught Junko's attention was the knowledge taught in the Yang family's academy. This kind of teaching philosophy was completely different from Confucianism. It involved a wide range of knowledge, which was really an eye-opener for her. Perhaps this was the true reason why the mercenaries were so powerful. In 2 years, she believed that she had learned a lot of knowledge that she did not dare to think about before. But today's blood transfusion greatly stimulated her. Even a person who was bound to die could be saved. What else could the 6th young master not do? If one day the mercenaries really wanted to become enemies with Japan, what could they use to resist? What could they use to resist? Junko, who had complicated thoughts, focused her gaze on Yang Chendong the moment he pushed the door open. She could not move her gaze away for a long time. Yang Chendong, who was being looked at, did not care. Because the moment he pushed the door open, almost everyone in the room looked at him. Especially Jin Ying's gaze. There was respect, fear, and even a bit of flattery in her eyes. Yes, this popular person by Dai Zong's side was someone that even the ministers wanted to curry favor with. At this moment, when she looked at Yang Chendong, she showed a flattering expression. What happened had not been hidden from him. On the contrary, someone had specially reported it to him. It was because of this that Jin Ying very keenly discovered the problem. In this operation, although Baiming was not the main culprit, they could not shirk their responsibility. The assassins were probably not sent by Emperor Daizong. Otherwise, why would he waste his time negotiating with the mercenaries here? But it was true that they were not the ones who sent the assassins, but they did not take any action to save him. This was too wrong. Chapter 8:17. Jin Ying could even guess that the moment this incident occurred, the news must have reached the emperor as soon as possible. The emperor was probably already thinking about getting someone else to do his dirty work. But he also didn't think about it. If the Duke of Loyalty had really met with an accident in Baiming's capital, the mercenaries wouldn't just let it go. At that time, no one would listen to their explanation, and a major battle would be unavoidable. Putting aside whether or not Baiming could win, at the very least, they would have lost the chance to destroy the Southern Ming Empire and contend for hegemony over the world. Jin Ying did not believe that the emperor, who had always been wise and farsighted, would not be able to see such a simple logic. The reason he had not done so was probably because he was too afraid of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage and wanted him dead too much. Fortunately, at the last moment, Baiming had still sent out their troops. This action would at least win back some points and some trust. This was why Jin Ying was gratified, but also why he was hesitant. Because this was only his own wishful thinking. He wasn't sure if Yang Chendong would think this way. If Yang Chendong blamed the assassination on him and killed him in a fit of rage, then given the current situation, even if the emperor was angry, there would be nothing he could do. This also meant that Jin Ying's life was in Yang Chendong's hands. How could Jin Ying not be afraid of this man who could decide his life and death with a single word? How could he not curry favor with him? Jin Ying smiled obsequiously. Lu Gui and the others lowered their heads, not daring to meet Yang Chendong's gaze. The atmosphere in the room suddenly quieted down. I am very angry. It was still Yang Chendong who spoke first. He found the chair at the head of the group and sat down. His gaze fell on Jin Ying and Lu Gui as he spoke. Yes, this Gong Gong can understand. Jin Ying also spoke up. Duke of Loyalty and Courage, I can guarantee that this matter is definitely not His Majesty's intention. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to negotiate with you. As for Dong Chunhua, who started the trouble, she will be severely punished. I can assure you of this. Jin Ying had taken the initiative to throw Dong Chunhua out to express her attitude. She was saying that she had the same attitude as Dong Chunhua on this matter. Yang Chendong was quite satisfied with this attitude, but if this was the only benefit, he would definitely not agree. It's not enough. Jianjia's words expressed his feelings. What else should I do? Please tell me, High Duke. As long as I can do it, I will do my best. Jin Ying also knew that throwing out Dong Chunhua was not enough to appease Yang Chendong's anger, even though he was already a second-rank official of the imperial court. Jin Ying's sensible behavior made Yang Chendong, who had been keeping a straight face, finally smile. It was easy to talk to smart people. At the very least, there was no need to waste so much time. All right, then I'll make a few requests. At the Dong residence in the capital, as the temporary emperor, Dong Chunhua had been in a rush to get close to him the moment he ascended the throne, and his life had been very smooth these last few years. Relying on his ability to see through the Son of Heaven and doing many things to cater to him, he had been promoted again and again. There was now news that he would be replacing the imperial censor of the left, Chen Yi, in the imperial censorate. Although they were both second-rank officials of the imperial court, there were still some differences between the left and the right. One's words carried enormous weight while the other had to look at the other's eyes. When he had been promoted from left deputy imperial censor to right imperial censor, Dong Chunhua had been extremely satisfied. But it didn't take long for him to have more pursuits, causing him to completely forget his duties. Everything he did was completely behind the acting emperor. Sometimes, he even had to play the role of the acting emperor. Now, his efforts were about to be repaid. Finally, his dreams were about to come true. How could he not be happy at this moment? Extreme joy begets sorrow. This was Dong Chunhua. Originally, he thought that he would be on the same level as the other ministers, but he never thought that such a thing would happen today. Being humiliated by Yang Chendong wasn't a big deal. After all, he was someone who could even force a minister to death. But the wrong thing was that the loyal duke shouldn't have been assassinated after this and almost lost his life. Even if Yang Chendong was dead, Dong Chunhua wouldn't be as scared as he was now. After all, what could a dead person do to him? Besides, once such a thing happened, the temporary emperor would definitely put someone like him in an important position and promote him in order to better stabilize the court. The problem was that the person didn't die. Looking at the cause of the matter, it was because he was poisoned by the food he ate that caused the other party to walk out of the Yang family manor, resulting in the assassination this time. Thinking about it from the beginning to the end, it seemed that he was the root of the disaster. Patting his conscience, Dong Chunhua really didn't know that there would be an assassination. Everything was really a coincidence. But now, would anyone believe what he was saying? After knowing that Yang Chendong was surrounded and killed, Dong Chunhua was completely frightened. Following that, he kept praying in his heart, hoping that the assassins would succeed. When the housekeeper who was sent to inquire about the news came back and said that the loyal duke seemed to be injured, but it wasn't a big problem, he plopped back on the chair. He knew that this time he was really finished. Yang Chendong didn't die, and his appearance was too coincidental. There was no way to explain this matter, and presumably, no one would be willing to listen to his explanation. Even the temporary emperor wouldn't see him. Otherwise, wouldn't it mean that this matter was related to the emperor? Knowing that no one could save him, Dong Chunhua leaned on the chair like a stall. When the sky was already dark, suddenly, there was a huge commotion outside the residence. A group of embroidered uniform guards rushed into the residence like wolves and tigers. The person in the lead was the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Lu Gui. Last time, a group of embroidered uniform guards also rushed into the Hu residence, but the leader was only a Baihu called Tong Lai. Now that Lu Gui had appeared, it was obvious that there was no turning back. Lu Gui flashed the driver's license in his hand, then he looked at the flustered Dong Chunhua and said, "Master Dong, you are suspected of being involved in the murder of an important official. You are suspected of colluding with a foreign country. Now, please come with us." Since the charges had been laid out, Dong Chunhua naturally wouldn't admit it. He hurriedly shook his head and said, "No. It must be a misunderstanding. Everything is a misunderstanding. I want to see the emperor. I want to see the emperor." Dong Chunhua was still making a final struggle, but Lu Gui wouldn't give him such a chance. His eyes were cold as he shook his head. "Master Dong, you should save these words for the imperial edict and the cold torture instruments. Come, take him away." Dong Chunhua had been taken away. It could be foreseen that such a big thing had happened, almost taking the lives of Jin Ing and the commander of the brocade guards. In addition, Dai Zong also had to take an evasive attitude. His future was already set in stone, and he would die without a doubt. At the same time, in the Yang Manor, the 9 members of the first guard who had died in battle were undergoing a solemn memorial service. Yang Chendong personally attended, his expression solemn. 2 years ago, he had dealt with the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. 2 years later, another second-rank official was also arrested because he had offended the Duke of Loyalty. Once this matter was out, Yang Chendong's reputation was once again expanded. It also caused more people to fear the Duke from the bottom of their hearts. Not long after this incident, the imperial edict eunuch in the palace went to the Hu residence and announced a series of appointments. He appointed Hu Zhangning as a member of the embroidered uniform guards, secondary 3rd rank. Hu Zhangning was originally a guardian, 5th rank, the right commander of the 5 cities military department and the general guarding the Yongding Gate. This was the request that Yang Chundong had made to Jin Ing. With this assassination attempt, he had made it clear that he did not trust the Baiming army. Only his own father-in-law could be trusted. In order to repair the relationship between the two sides, Jin Ing expressed his agreement. However, this appointment still had to be reported to the emperor for the final decision. Now that the appointment had been announced, it was a sign that Zhu Qiu was conceding. Yang Chundong was even more gratified. With these official positions and titles, if anything happened in the capital, the Hu clan would have the power to protect itself. There was no need to worry too much. In the imperial palace, Jin Ing was still kneeling in the main hall, her head lowered as she faced Zhu Qiu on the golden dragon throne. She had already listed all of Yang Chundong's new requests. Other than the last one, the Duke of Loyalty's request for the title of king, all of his other requests had been approved. But because this request had not been approved, Jin Ing was forced to remain kneeling on the ground. Rise. Seeing that Jin Ing had been kneeling ever since she had returned, Zhu Qiu couldn't bear to see her kneeling. Today's incident had nothing to do with Jin Ing, and not only that, she had almost lost her life. Jin Ing gave her thanks and stood up, but she did not leave. She continued to stand with her head lowered. Although she said nothing, her desire for an explanation was obvious. It's impossible to make him king. I'm not as stupid as some people who try to bribe people by making me king of a different surname. Give him a reply. In order to show our sincerity, we can think of other ways to compensate them. Zhu Qiu's words were resolute and decisive, and there was no room for discussion. There was one more thing that Zhu Qiu didn't say. For someone like Yang Chundong, even if you gave him the title of king, he wouldn't be able to use it. It would only strengthen his reputation. Therefore, he would never do such a thankless thing. Understanding the emperor's meaning, Jin Ing nodded. Although he was indebted to Yang Chundong for not killing him today, everything he had now was bestowed upon him by the emperor in front of him. Based on this, he was very clear about his position. Very quickly, Jin Ing sent someone to convey the emperor's intentions. He tactfully rejected the request to be conferred the title of king, saying that the time was not right. Then he proposed that in the future, the supply of provisions to the first city could be transported from Tianjing to the capital. From there, they could directly leave Juyong Pass and pass through Xian Manor and Tala City. Northern Ming would not set up any obstacles, and the mercenaries would only need to pay the required amount of money to pass through. Chapter 8:18. When Yang Chundong saw this news, he was in his study room. Standing beside him was the cautious director of the Security Bureau, Yang San. The previous director was Hu Mang. Later, because he had too many things to do, he completely put down this part-time job. Yang Sandy concentrated his power, and because of this, he did a lot of big things. Of course, it was inevitable that there were some mistakes. Don't look at how the words of the Security Bureau carried weight, and everyone was afraid of him. But when he stood beside Yang Chundong, he was very obedient and stood obediently. Unless the 6th young master asked, he didn't dare to say a word. Tell me. Yang Chundong asked casually as he threw the booklet Jin Ing had sent onto the table. He leaned back in his chair and asked casually. There was only Yang San in the room. Of course, this question was asked to him. The director of the Security Bureau didn't answer immediately. He first thought about it before replying. At present, this is a very beneficial thing for both sides. We lack things and they lack money. This can be considered a win-win situation. Yang Chundong nodded gently. At present, this is the case. We should also seize this opportunity to transport more things from Qiqian City to the origin city. If one day, the two sides have a falling out, we won't have to worry about the problem of food. Of course, the Security Bureau must pay attention to this matter and closely monitor the movements of all sides in the capital. Once there is a change in the situation, immediately make countermeasures and preparations. Yes. Yang San nodded heavily. By the way, what do you plan to do over there? Yang Chendong's chin moved slightly toward the south. After the Security Bureau used a lot of manpower and material resources, a telegram soon came from the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty. Although there was not enough evidence to prove it, various clues had pointed to Chao Yen, the adopted son of the chief eunuch, Chao Jixiang. Yang San just reported this matter to the 6th young master. Young master, we have come up with a few plans to deal with the Southern Ming Empire's ministers. There is also a plan to deal with Chao Jixiang himself. This subordinate thinks that we can give it a try. Yang San carefully probed. As Yang Xie's power continued to expand, he found that he couldn't understand his young master anymore. Yang Chendong's mouth twitched slightly after hearing this. Give him a taste of his own medicine? It seems feasible, but the success rate is too low. They will definitely be more careful. If we do this, not only will we not be able to kill them, but the strength of the Security Bureau's elites will also be damaged. It's not appropriate. Listening to Yang Chendong's concern for the Security Bureau, Yang San said gratefully, "Thank you, young master, for your concern, but are we going to do nothing?" That's not a bad suggestion. Yang Chendong suddenly laughed. Yang San was stunned when he heard this. He just said it casually, but why did the 6th young master take it seriously? Yang Chendong seemed to see the hesitation on Yang San's face. He chuckled and said, "Sometimes, the greatest deterrent effect is to raise your hand but not drop it." Yang San quickly nodded in relief after hearing this sentence. "I understand. Young master wants to hang a knife over their heads, but not drop it. Let them live in fear and anxiety every day." That's right. Yang Chendong finally laughed. If they really killed a few ministers, the Security Bureau could do it by paying a price. However, if they did that, it would be too easy for them. They might as well do nothing and make the other party suspicious. Even if they had to scare them half to death, it would be better. We don't have to kill people, but we can't do nothing. Otherwise, there will be no end to this. How about this? Send a telegram to my 4th brother and tell him to raise the prices of all the merchants from the Southern Ming Empire by 5% as a warning. The smile on Yang Chendong's face faded, replaced by a trace of anger under his calm expression. Killing 9 of his soldiers and seriously injuring Yang Xi, this matter couldn't be settled so easily. A 5% increase was enough to give the Southern Ming merchants a headache. This way, not only could Crimson City earn more money, but it could also weaken the economic strength of the Southern Ming Empire. It could be considered killing 2 birds with 1 stone. When Yang San heard the 5% increase in the price of goods, his heart couldn't help but tighten. This was a good thing, but wouldn't Lord Yang Xi's safety be worried? However, before he could ask the question in his heart, Yang Chendong had already replied, "Don't worry, nothing will happen to my 4th brother. After all, the other party did something wrong this time, so they won't bother about this matter. Other than obediently admitting their mistakes, they have no other choice. If they really have the guts to make a move on my 4th brother, then all of their business channels into the Southern Ming Empire will be cut off. At that time, the ones crying will only be themselves. If they did something wrong, they had to be prepared to accept the punishment. If they continued to make mistakes, then they would be seeking death." Yang Chendong could see this point. Presumably, Emperor Ingzong of the Southern Ming Empire and the ministers under him could also see it clearly. Right now, the Southern Ming Empire wasn't peaceful and its territory was shrinking. With Min Zhuangwang and the others eyeing the southwest covetously, if they were smart, they wouldn't provoke him. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to forcing the mercenaries to join hands with Zhu Huizhen. In the new year of 1453 AD, Yang Chendong spent the new year in the Yang family manor. Even though an assassination had just happened, the manor had already made preparations, so the New Year's atmosphere was still very lively. A party that had been prepared for a long time diluted the previous assassination and made many people smile again. 9 days later, on the 9th day of the first month of the new year, Yang Chendong and his group left the Yang family manor and went from the outskirts of the capital to the Juyong Pass. Along with them were the 200 teachers and students of the Yang family academy, as well as the 2 madams and 7th sister Yang duo. It could be said that after leaving, the Yang family manor was basically empty. other than the housekeeper Yang Neng who stayed behind to take care of the business. Only the servant Yang Lu stayed behind to handle the communication with the southern Ming Empire. Other than the two madams, Yang Chendong only brought along seventh sister Yang Duo, who was already alone. The reason for this was because the other brothers and sisters had already settled down here. They couldn't leave as they wished like Yang Duo. Yang Chendong tacitly agreed to the choice of his brothers and sisters. Perhaps if they stayed, Bai Ming would feel more at ease. As for whether or not they would act against his family when the relationship between the two sides broke down, he wasn't too worried. After all, these family members had lived in the capital for many years and had a certain amount of resources. Moreover, their father was Yang Rong, so they would probably have to think twice before acting. Moreover, with the help of Hu Xiao, Su Yozhen and the others, the outcome wouldn't be too bad. When the time came, he would make arrangements in advance. Speaking of Su Yozhen, after that sudden conversation, he had finally adjusted his position. No matter how much he didn't think highly of the mercenary ship, he had already boarded it and could not back down. The only thing he could do was think about how to make this ship sail even further. Solving this problem could be considered a great harvest from this trip to the capital. Not long after Yang Chendong's group left the capital, another group quickly caught up. They first brushed shoulders with the Yang clan's group, and then they overtook them and took the lead. This group was led by Deng Chang, the eunuch of the Xian residence. During the negotiations, the two sides had already made it clear that Tulu City would be handed over to Northern Ming. This was a kind of goodwill that Yang Chendong expressed, and also an explanation to the people of the world. That was, the mercenaries were actually fighting for the Great Ming, fighting for the world. Only by doing this could the voices of the people gradually die down. Only by doing this could Zhu Qiu stabilize the situation in the court, concentrate on developing himself, and provide a safe supply route for the mercenaries. Deng Chang's group slowly advanced forward. They had no choice but to move slowly. The Yang clan's group had brought far too many things, and there were also many women in the group. Thus, moving faster was an extravagant hope. Fortunately, after the new year, the weather was slowly warming up, and there were no more incidents of people getting frostbite on the road. With Deng Chang's group at the front, the road was green without any accidents. They passed through Juyong Pass and arrived at the Xian residence. 1 month later, they arrived at the Xian residence. Speaking of which, the Xian residence was Deng Chang's territory, and he had set up a banquet to entertain his guests. Yang Chendong once more met with the commander of the bureau, Shi Wanshan. Compared to the last time, Shi Wanshan's face was much more cordial this time. After all, when he received the guests last time, he still had to consider the opinions of his superiors. However, this time, he was receiving the orders of his superiors. The atmosphere between them was much more relaxed. In this meeting, Yang Chendong had brought up the problem of the Han people's lives and status. He had bluntly pointed out that the Han people should have been the strongest people in the world, and that all other races should serve the Han people. Anyone who made the lives of the people so miserable that they couldn't even solve the problem of food and clothing was a piece of trash that should be reprimanded by the people of the world. In response to Yang Chendong's words, Shi Wanshan could only smile apologetically and nod his head. He was only a general temporarily residing in the Xian residence. When it came to the lives of the people, there wasn't much he could do. But he could still see Yang Chendong's domineering aura from these words, and a thought flashed through his mind. It seemed that it was a blessing for the Han people for such a person to become the ruler of the Han people. Naturally, this thought only flashed through his mind. He was now a second-rank general in the Bai Ming army. Since he was paid by others, he had to work for them. This was a principle that hadn't changed since ancient times. Chapter 8:19. In Xian City, Yang Chendong only stayed for 2 days before leaving. Deng Chang and Shi Wanshan followed everyone to Tala City. In this city, Lu Zhua of the 2nd Reinforced Cavalry Regiment was waiting. When they saw Yang Chendong riding the white dragon horse in front of the team from afar, they excitedly greeted him. When they were still far away, they dismounted and saluted to show their respect and longing. Yang Chendong first returned a military salute, then looked at Xianxia and Deng Chong and said, "Let me introduce you to. This is Lu Zhua, the commander of the 2nd Reinforced Mercenary Regiment. He is a fierce general." "Greetings, Commander Lu," Deng Chong and Xianxia said with admiration. Lu Zhua naturally cupped his fist in return. After the two sides met, Yang Chendong said, "All right, this is Talicity. I'll hand it over to you now. In the future, the provisions our mercenaries need will be delivered through here. When the time comes, I hope the two of you can make things convenient for us. Don't make everyone unhappy. It wouldn't be good if we fought." Yang Chendong still had a smile on his face as he spoke, but when he reached the end, his expression had already become a little more serious. It was as if he was a completely different person. Xianxia and Deng Chong were shocked when they heard these words, but they didn't show it on their faces. They just smiled and said, No, we are all one family, one family." "That's good. Even if you can see your friend off for 1,000 miles, there will always be a farewell. Let's part here." Yang Chendong laughed and squeezed the white dragon horse's belly with his legs. Immediately, the group of people passed through the deserted Talicity and went straight to Xianxia City. Seeing Yang Chendong and the 2nd Reinforced Cavalry Regiment under the protection of Xiaofeng's Cold Vanguard Regiment and the 2nd Reinforced Cavalry Regiment, Xianxia looked at their backs and said with emotion, "Eunuch Deng, don't you think this is letting the tiger return to the mountain?" "Silence," Deng Chong said nervously as if someone had stepped on his tail. He looked around and when he saw that no one was paying attention to them, he said softly, "General Shi, there are some things that we can't decide. We only need to complete the tasks assigned by the imperial court." Xianxia pretended to be terrified and nodded repeatedly, but in his heart, he was certain of the statement just now. Although he had only met Yang Chendong twice, he had a feeling that Yang Chendong was extraordinary. If he was not restrained, once he became powerful, he would turn into a dragon as soon as he encountered the wind and clouds. As for Yang Chendong, he didn't know how Wanshur Mountain would evaluate him. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Instead, he was curious that it was Lu Zhua who came to greet him instead of Tiger's Mane. The telegram that he was coming back had been sent a few days ago. By right, Tiger's Mane should have come to welcome him personally. Could it be that there was a problem in the first city? With confusion, Yang Chendong asked Commander Lu Zhua who came to greet him. "Yes." Lu Zhua nodded without hiding anything. In front of Yang Chendong, he didn't dare to lie. Not long after the new year, there was a sudden movement in the northwest. The Mongol army of the Gobi Desert suddenly sent troops to attack Wandu. The general guarding the city, Mu Ren, was defeated and retreated with his troops. Since then, that place became the territory of the Gobi Desert Mongol army. But that place was too close to our first city. It was only more than 200 miles away. Under the rapid movement of the cavalry, it would soon threaten our safety. Commander Tiger was worried that there would be problems in the future, so he took advantage of the fact that the other party had not yet gained a firm foothold and deployed troops to attack there. There was really no time to come to Talicity to pick up the 6th young master, so he arranged for me to come with the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Take down Wandu? Yang Chendong listened to Lu Zhua's introduction and nodded first. If this was the case, Wandu would absolutely not be allowed to be touched by others. As the saying goes, how could one allow others to sleep beside one's bed? But the problem came again. Even if everyone understood this problem, what did the Gobi Desert Mongol army think? They knew that the mercenaries would not give up and would not allow them to touch the surrounding area of the first city. So why did they occupy that place? At this time, there was still snow on the grassland. It was not a good season for grazing. Even if it was, a small place like Wandu should not let the Gobi Desert Mongol army take such a big risk. Intuition suddenly told Yang Chendong that something was not right. Yang Chendong's expression changed and he said to Beta Persei beside him, "Quick, send a telegram immediately to ask the first city if Tiger's Mane has sent troops. If not, ask them to postpone it." Seeing the 6th young master's expression change dramatically, Beta Persei quickly agreed and asked someone to send a telegram. Not long after, there was a reply to the telegram. Tiger's Mane had already set off 3 days ago and should have already fought with the Gobi Desert Mongol army. Speed up the march and get back to the first city as soon as possible. Yang Chendong, who heard the news, stopped talking and took the initiative to speed up. In view of Yang Chendong's performance, the others also began to speed up involuntarily. Only half a day later, a new telegram was sent to Yang Chendong. Sure enough, as he had guessed, something had happened. In the telegram, it said that the city of Wandu was a trap. The mercenaries were caught off guard and fell into the trap. The army suffered heavy losses. In the end, the Tatar cavalry led by Su He fought desperately to open up a bloody path. Now they had fled back to the first city and the pursuers were close to the first city. There was a long list of losses at the bottom of the telegram. Looking at the introduction above, the independent division lost 4 battalions and more than half of the Tatar cavalry regiment lost more than 1,500 people. Of the 3 newly formed regiments of new recruits, 2 of them had lost around 4,000 men. The most miserable one was the cavalry regiment, which had a total of 3,200 men. In the end, less than 500 managed to escape. Among them, the commander of the 2nd Battalion, Gao Danhua, had died in battle, while the commander of the 1st Battalion, Deng Yu, had been seriously injured. Looking at the bloody numbers on the telegram, the mercenaries lost 10,000 people in this battle and countless people were injured. Yang Chendong's face was terrifyingly gloomy at this moment. After 6 to 7 breaths, he suddenly raised his head and said fiercely, "Reinforce the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Leave 2 battalions to escort the madams back to the first city. The remaining battalion will pull the wooden carriage and bring Commander Xiao Feng's Cold Vanguard Regiment to the first city with me." 10,000 people were killed in the battle and countless people were injured. This was the largest number of casualties since the mercenaries were established. At the same time, it could be considered a serious injury. However, what was even more terrifying was that the current origin city was already in danger. If the city was in danger, he was afraid that such a long time of effort would be in vain. This was definitely not what Yang Chendong wanted to see. After the order was given, the carriage was dismantled into pieces of wooden planks. On them sat the Cold Vanguard soldiers who held the 95 style. Fortunately, there was heavy snow on the road. With the help of the snow, it was not difficult to pull them up. At this moment, Xiao Feng's Cold Vanguard Regiment had 1,300 people and Ma Xiangshan's reinforced battalion had 1,000 people. A total of 2,300 people flew toward the first city. At this time, in the first city, Tiger's mane looked haggard and his face was very ugly. He, who had been with the young master for the longest time, had always wanted to use his strength to prove himself and tell others that he did not rely on his qualifications to become the leader of a division. It could be said that this idea was good, but because he was too eager and too anxious, when he saw that Huan City, which was only 200 li away, had changed hands, he did not even wait for Yang Chendong to arrive before he began to mobilize his troops. Or rather, he did not want to wait for the return of the 6th young master. He just wanted to fight a beautiful battle to prove himself. However, he never expected that he would return in defeat. 10,000 soldiers died in battle, countless were injured, and the first city was in danger of being surrounded. The scouts at the front had already sent news that the Mongolian army in the desert had already arrived outside the city. They were less than 20 miles away from the greenhouse plantation. The generals below were all asking for instructions on what to do. Although the greenhouse plantation was only a mere 2,000 mu of land and was really nothing, it was arranged by the 6th young master to be planted. The vegetables that appeared in it once made the Mongolian people call the god of war the messenger of the immortal heaven. It was already a symbol, and the symbolic meaning was greater than the actual meaning. Such a place absolutely could not be lost. Otherwise, without waiting for the 6th young master to scold him, Tiger's mane would not be able to get over this hurdle in his heart. Men, bring out the 6 firearm battalions of the independent division. The others will guard the city. Even if I die on the battlefield, you are not allowed to open the city gate and take a step out of the first city. Tiger's mane made up his mind. Since the bad situation was caused by his poor command, then he had to personally stand up and solve this problem. Although he did not know if he could do it, At least he would use all his strength and even pay with his life. Yang Chendong was not here, so the commander of the army in the city was Tiger's Mane. In this aspect, even Yu Mian could not be compared to him. He gave the order. Even if the officers below had different opinions, they could only endure it. There was strict discipline in the army. Once the commander gave a military order, even if it was wrong, they had to carry it out. Everything had to wait until the war was over. When the conclusion was made, everyone would have the freedom to express their own opinions. Leaving Commander Su He to guard the city, Tiger's Mane led 6 battalions of firearmed soldiers out of the city. When he arrived at the greenhouse plantation, the enemy was already less than 5 miles away from him. Everyone, find a suitable formation. As long as the enemy dares to come, beat them all back. Tiger's Mane put his hands on his waist and roared with a cold face at Vice Commander Xen Honghai and the 6 battalion commanders. 6 battalions, more than 2,000 soldiers armed with Type 81 rifles spread out in units, forming a huge temporary battlefield. The straight line of the battlefield reached a distance of several miles. The mercenaries set up a strict formation, and the enemy on the other side also stopped in their tracks. They did not immediately launch an attack. Instead, they set up camp, buried pots and cooked rice, and put on an unhurried appearance. Chapter 8:20. In the temporary tent, Swade sat at the head of the table. As the main commander of this battle and the one who had sent the most troops, he had the right to sit in this position. However, the people sitting on the left and right of the Khan were even more surprising. Speaking of which, they were Yang Chendong's old friends, Agar Dorji and Fan Yuhai. Needless to say, Agar Dorji's 50,000 cavalry had been defeated at the hands of Yang Chendong, and even his son, Harariku, had been lost. If General Su He had not stepped in at the critical moment, he and his son would not have been able to escape. However, when they were completely safe and no one could threaten them, when the father and son were finally reunited, not only were they not grateful to Su He, they even scolded him for being disloyal after drinking. This strange father and son even blamed Su He for their defeat, believing that it was because he was greedy and afraid of death that he did not fulfill his responsibilities, which led to the final defeat. They had been brooding over this matter and had been looking for an opportunity to take revenge. It was at this time that they encountered another cavalry unit on the grassland. Both sides immediately got on their horses and carriages, as if they were going to fight. But in the end, they did not fight because the other party's general took the initiative to come out and say that he wanted to have a good talk with them. From afar, Agar Dorji noticed that the enemy had about 15,000 cavalry, which was about the same as his own army. But the difference was that he had brought some defeated soldiers and some men who had just been abducted from all over the grassland. Once the battle started, he wasn't completely sure how much combat strength they could exert. He wasn't even completely sure if they would turn around and run away when the battle started. With such an army, it was naturally best to avoid a fight if possible. Just like this, Agar Dorji met with the enemy General Fan Yuhai in front of the two armies. Through their conversation, he learned about the other party's background. Unexpectedly, the other party was also a defeated army that had escaped from the Jiaoji kingdom in the south of the Great Ming dynasty. Even the other party's cavalry was mostly captured and plundered along the way, which was very similar to his own. However, this was not the end of it. What was even more similar was that they had both been defeated by Yang Chendong. At this time, the two sides had found a common language, and for a time, they hit it off and regretted that they had not met earlier. What was even more rare was that this general called Fan Yuhai took the initiative to lower his status, stating that as long as they could defeat Yang Chendong's mercenaries, he was willing to respect Agar Dorji, which made the latter very happy. Originally, he thought that he had lost his main army, and he did not know how long it would take for him to rise again. Who would have thought that an opportunity appeared so soon? Overjoyed, he immediately agreed, and the two sides became allies, with Agar Dorji as the leader. Fan Yuhai was a famous general in Jiaoji, and had even brought a lot of trouble to Yang Chendong. However, because this person was very good at seeing the big picture, every time the situation was dangerous, he would always be the first to escape, which made Yang Chendong unable to catch him several times. After several exchanges, Fan Yuhai could also see that he was really not Yang Chendong's opponent. Although he was a proud person and usually did not put others in his eyes, he had to admit in his heart that whether it was the grasp of the battlefield or the fighting strength of the army, he was indeed inferior to Yang Chendong. Fan Yuhai could not help but feel like he was born in the East. Then he made an important decision, and that was to leave the south and go to the north. He heard that the grasslands there were fertile and very suitable for raising horses. Moreover, the people there were more martial spirit because of the climate and environment. In his eyes, these conditions were undoubtedly very tempting. With his ability and wisdom, it should not be a problem for him to carve out a piece of the world and create the strongest cavalry in the world. With these thoughts in mind, Fan Yuhai set off. After passing through dense forests and mountains, they finally arrived at the grassland after suffering countless hardships. However, he soon realized that there was a huge difference between what he had heard and the actual situation. Who said that grasslands had to be fertile? Most of the places he saw were deserts, and the degree of desolation shocked him several times. It was said that the south was a barren land, but in Fan Yuhai's eyes, it was far inferior to this boundless desert. However, since he had already made his choice, Fan Yuhai certainly wouldn't turn back. He could only make up his mind and continue to walk forward. Along the way, he also encountered some small tribes. Of course, he would snatch whatever he could and take whatever he could. This allowed him to expand his original 5,000 elite soldiers to the current 15,000. The army grew stronger and finally walked out of the desert and into the grasslands. Then he met Agar Dorji and learned more about this place. Fan Yuhai, who had always been known for his forbearance and intelligence, immediately decided to form an alliance with him and even respect him. He did not make such a decision because he was sincerely submitting to him. Instead, he wanted to use this opportunity to inquire about more things and understand more about the situation in this place. How could Agar Dorji know about this? Fan Yuhai being so obedient and tactful made him happy. At the same time, he answered almost all of Fan Yuhai's questions and explained the situation of this grassland without much effort. Fan Yuhai kept a smile on his face, but only the heavens knew how shocked he was in his heart. He lamented his bad luck to meet Yang Chendong here, and at the same time, he also lamented the speed at which Yang Chendong developed. Of course, there was also a voice in his heart that told him that this was his chance to turn the tables. Generally speaking, Fan Yuhai wanted to turn the tables not only because he had been defeated time and time again by Yang Chendong, but also because he wanted to get back at Yang Chendong. It was also because he realized that the forces here were intertwined with each other and were mainly cavalry. This way, they could greatly suppress the power of the muskets. Wasn't this an environment that could greatly reduce the strength of both sides exactly what he wanted? With the idea of turning the tables, Fan Yuhai began to think. He proposed the idea of allying with the Mongol tribes of the Gobi Desert to deal with the mercenaries together. At first, Agar Dorji did not agree with this idea. First, their relationship was not good. Back then, he had wanted to snatch Sud Khan's daughter to be his daughter-in-law. Second, his strength was not as good as Sud Khan's, and if they formed an alliance, it would be difficult for him to take the lead. This was something that Agar Dorji, who was used to having his entire army move at a single command, could not accept. Who was Fan Yuhai? He was the best at reading people's minds. He quickly found Agar Dorji's concerns and said that no matter who the alliance was, he was willing to respect them. At the same time, he also said that he was willing to persuade Sud Khan. Once they succeeded, they would join forces to attack the mercenaries. If they won, it would be easy to share the benefits. If they lost, it would be fine. Once the opportunity was right, they could swallow the Mongol tribes of the desert. There was a large amount of land there, and countless horses and sheep. It was enough for them to rise from the ashes. After some persuasion, Agar Dorji saw hope again and finally agreed. Fan Yuhai also followed the direction that Agar Dorji pointed to. After entering the Mongol tribes of the desert, he quickly convinced Sud Khan. It was also easy to find an excuse. He directly said that the strength of the mercenaries was a threat to the existence of all the grassland tribes. In addition, he allowed Agadorji's tribe to continue to grow, so he might as well call them over to watch over them. If there was a chance, he could directly devour the cavalry under his command. This was also a way to strengthen himself. After some consideration, Sud Khan agreed to this decision. Just as Fan Yuhai said, he did not want to see the mercenaries grow stronger and become a threat to himself. He also wanted to swallow Agar Dorji's tribe completely. In the end, he agreed. At this point, the alliance of the three forces was quickly formed under Fan Yuhai's guidance. The next step was to choose the location of the battle. After some investigation, Wandu was the most suitable place. The battle that Fan Yuhai had planned was about to begin. As expected, Tiger's Mane was tricked and was heavily injured. The myth of the mercenaries being invincible was broken. In the tent, Sud Khan was sitting in the main seat, his face full of joy. In the Battle of Wandu City, he had beheaded 10,000 enemies and injured countless enemies. This was the humiliation of his previous two defeats. On the battlefield, they had obtained countless horses and sabers. He had seen those things and they were indeed very sharp and tough. They were much stronger than the sabers in their hands. With such a harvest, Sud Khan was in a good mood. What made him even more excited was that this battle had broken the myth of the mercenaries being invincible. The originally low morale had been boosted, and some of the disloyal people in the tribe had become much more obedient. All of this was thanks to Fan Yuhai, who was sitting on the right. At this moment, he looked at Fan Yuhai with eyes full of admiration, so much so that an idea popped up in his mind. In order to rope this person in, could he keep him by his side through marriage? Fan Yuhai was 38 years old. From this point of view, he was older than Tuoya and could even barely be her father. However, since it was a marriage, he naturally would not consider such a problem. In order to deepen the relationship between the two sides, there were many cases in history of old men over 60 years old marrying teenage girls. As long as he could achieve his goal, this was not a problem. Sud Khan looked at Fan Yuhai fervently, and his voice became much warmer. General Fan, in your opinion, what should we do next? Do you even need to ask? Of course, we'll just fight. Halajuo, who was standing behind Agar Dorji, did not wait for others to say anything and took the initiative to speak. Chapter 8:21. For his son's rude behavior, Agar Dorji didn't think it was wrong at all. On the contrary, he nodded approvingly. My son is right. Now that we have defeated the mercenaries, the scouts have also sent news that the number of mercenaries in the beginning city is less than 10,000. This is the best time for us to follow up the victory. There are a lot of provisions and 70,000 people in the city. They are all wealth. As he spoke, Agar Dorji already had a greedy look on his face. It was exactly the same as Horror Dorji behind him. They were indeed father and son. Yes. Sud Khan also nodded after hearing this. He also had the same opinion. In his opinion, since they could severely injure more than 10,000 mercenaries before, then the 10,000 wounded people in the city were not a concern. Among the three people in the alliance, two of them nodded. Logically speaking, they had set the rules for this matter. But for some reason, Fan Yuhai didn't say anything, and the two of them didn't rush to give orders. Because Fan Yuhai didn't say anything, the atmosphere in the tent slowly became quiet. In the Battle of Wandu City, this person had proven his ability with practical actions. At this moment, everyone looked at him respectfully, waiting for his final decision. Among the crowd, only Horror Dorji had a look of impatience. In his opinion, Fan Yuhai was nothing special. He was just lucky and defeated the mercenaries once. This didn't prove that he was the best. However, even his father didn't say anything. Of course, he couldn't stand up and criticize Fan Yuhai. Time ticked by. Seeing that Fan Yuhai was still deep in thought, Sudor Khan couldn't hold it in any longer and asked, General Fan, is there something wrong? Yes, there is something wrong. Fan Yuhai finally raised his head. His face looked very solemn. What's wrong? Agar Dorji's mouth was quick. He leaned forward and looked impatient. If this person didn't say anything, he wouldn't give up. Report. At this moment, the voice of a scout suddenly came from outside the tent. Then, a man wearing a typical Mongolian costume entered the tent and knelt on the ground. He looked up and said to Sud Khan, "Khan, the scout found an army in the southeast. There are about 2,000 people." "Army? Have you found out who it is?" Suda's confident smile disappeared in an instant. Could it be that a nearby tribe saw an opportunity and wanted to take a share of the pie? Without making the Sud wait for too long, the kneeling scout raised his head and said, reporting to the Khan, "It's too far away to see clearly, but judging from the flag, it should be the flag of the war god." "What?" At this moment, not only did Suder yell out in surprise, even Agadorji, who was sitting on the left, had a look of shock on his face. When ancient armies marched to war, they would each have their own flag, just like mercenaries. Most of them would use the 5-star flag, but wherever Yang Chendong appeared, unless they wanted to hide their identity, they would hang the 2 words "War God" to show their military might. Since the scout said that the other party was using the flag of the war god, needless to say, it should be Yang Chendong who appeared. As the saying goes, a person's name is like a tree's shadow. When they heard the name Yang Chendong, it was normal for the 3 people who had lost to him to change their expressions. The reason why they dared to set a trap in Yunda City was because they knew that Yang Chendong had gone to Baiming's capital and was not in the origin city. Otherwise, it was unknown whether they would dare to fight with the mercenaries so openly. Sud Khan and Agadorji did not speak. Even Fan Yuhai, who was sitting on the right, did not speak. They all needed time to digest the news they had just received. The scouts on the grassland were fast, had good horsemanship, and were very vigilant. However, they had a fatal weakness, which was that they could only show off in their own territory. They were not strong enough to extend their tentacles to other places, such as Baiming's capital. They did not have any basis for when Yang Chendong would come back. Everything was just guessing. But at such a critical time, the other party appeared and caught them off guard. After an unknown period of time, Sud Khan, who was sitting at the head of the table, finally could not help but say, "Everyone, what should we do next? Should we fight or not?" "Why should we not fight?" Hiraruo did not wait for the others to express their opinions and was the first to speak. He was captured by Yang Chendong and regarded it as the greatest shame of his life. Even in his dreams, he was thinking about how to turn the tables. Now that they had finally grasped the advantage, if they retreated just because they heard a name, wouldn't it prove that they were afraid of the great Ming's loyal duke? If they did not even have the courage to fight, how could they talk about revenge? "Shut up." Unlike before, when he allowed his son to interrupt, Agar Dorji finally scolded and then closed his mouth tightly. Back then, the 50,000 soldiers were defeated by Yang Chendong. This was indeed a shadow in his heart, a shadow that could not be erased and even made him afraid when he thought of it. Seeing Agar Dorji's performance, Sud Khan was very disappointed. Previously, he was so fearless and looked like he was going to attack the first city. Now, just a name scared him to this extent. If such an ally wanted to achieve great things, it could only be a joke. Since he didn't have much hope for Agar, Dorj, Swade could only look at Fan Yuhai. Fan Yuhai was calm and collected, so his decisions were highly valued. Fan Yuhai was indeed deep in thought at this moment. His understanding of Yang Chendong was no less than Suda and the others. In fact, he knew more. Because of this, he was very clear about what kind of ability this person had. To be honest, he was not prepared to fight with Yang Chendong because he did not have the slightest confidence in winning. Sud Khan was still Agar Dorji. Although he also had a large number of soldiers, they were all cavalry. However, when facing Yang Chendong, would he be able to display his full strength? Sud Khan felt that it was impossible. It was not easy for him to have the courage to rush up and not run away. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. Since he knows that he can't win, then he won't fight. In any case, the battle had just begun. If he wanted to fight, there would be many opportunities in the future. Let's retreat. The advantage of cavalry is in charging on the battlefield, not sieging and conquering. This time, the other party is prepared, so it will be difficult for us to gain any benefits. Since that's the case, it is better to wait for the other party to attack us. In that case, in a mobile battle, the power of their guns will be reduced to the minimum, which is the most beneficial for us. After thinking for a while, Fan Yuhai finally made a decision. After hearing this, he could even hear Sud Khan and Agar Dorji heaving a sigh of relief. Good. Since that's the case, I also agree to withdraw. Just as Agar Dorji finished speaking, Sud Khan nodded. Since that's the case, we will retreat to Wanda City first and look for an opportunity. The Mongol Alliance army, who had been eyeing the first city covetously and wanted to destroy the first city, retreated. When Yang Chendong arrived with Xiao Feng's Cold Vanguard Regiment, he saw the other party retreating. Sixth young master, should we charge up? Ma Xiangshan's eyes were filled with killing intent as he asked excitedly. No need. Yang Chendong shook his head. Xiao Feng's Cold Vanguard Regiment had just come into contact with warhorses, so their horsemanship training still needed to be strengthened. At this time, they gave up the advantage of guns and charged up. Even if they fought, they would not have much chance of winning. Once they forced the other party, they might be bitten back. This was not what he wanted to see. Right now, stabilizing the situation in the first city and restoring the fighting power of the soldiers was the right thing to do. As for the enemy in front of him, he would let them be proud for 2 days. The enemy retreated. Yang Chendong did not intend to chase after them. He brought the somewhat disappointed Xiao Feng's regiment and Ma Xiangshan's battalion back to the first city. At the city gate, in the cold weather, Tiger's Mane was kneeling naked with a few dried branches tied to his back. Behind him, there was a group of officers kneeling. Among them, Su He, Zhui Feng, and the others were also in the crowd. Hee. Seeing this scene, Yang Chendong could not help but laugh out loud. He actually played the game of carrying a bramble and asking for forgiveness. This made him feel like crying and laughing. Yang Chendong, who was riding on the white dragon horse, actually laughed. This scene was seen by some officers and they did not know what to do. After such a defeat, shouldn't the sixth young master be angry, or even very angry? What was the meaning of this smile? No one could see through Yang Chendong's meaning and thoughts. All they could do was to lower their heads even more. They just hoped that the sixth young master would not notice them. After all, losing a battle was not a glorious thing. If they were remembered at this time, wouldn't they be asking for trouble? Everyone knelt on the ground and did not say a word. It was not until Yang Chendong led the army to the city gate that he looked at the kneeling people that he finally opened his mouth and said, "What? Is this how you welcome me?" Facing Yang Chendong's questioning, no one dared to remain silent. Especially Tiger's Mane, who had the highest military position. He was the first to raise his head and said with a pained expression, "Young master, we did something wrong. Please punish me." All right. Victory and defeat are common in war. After all, we didn't lose the city. Everyone, get up. Yang Chendong had a smile on his face. There was no trace of anger. This extremely abnormal scene made many of the officers who were originally worried feel much more at ease. That's right. This time, they had lost the battle, but everyone had put in a lot of effort. They could only blame the enemy for being too cunning. Chapter 8:22. Under Yang Chendong's signal, Beta Persei also found a military coat and put it on Tiger's Mane. Then, everyone followed the sixth young master into the city. Although they had only been away for 3 months, the atmosphere in the city had changed. It was not as noisy as before. Even the number of people walking on the streets seemed to have decreased a lot. This was the reaction and result after a defeat. Yang Chendong saw this, but he did not say a word. The team arrived at the Yang mansion. After Xiao Feng's group was settled in the barracks, Tiger's Mane, Windchaser, and Su He all knelt on the ground. They were smart enough to know that this was the time for the sixth young master to punish them. Yang Chendong did not reprimand them in front of so many people because he wanted to save them face. After all, they were all leaders. If they were scolded too harshly in front of their subordinates, it would not be beneficial for them to lead and command troops in the future. Since there were no outsiders, Yang Chendong casually found a chair and sat down. He glanced at the 3 people kneeling on the ground and said, "Tell me, what's going on?" Although he knew from the telegram that they were defeated, it did not explain what had happened. Without understanding, there was no right to speak. Yang Chendong wanted to know how the other party defeated Tiger's Mane and the others. After all conspiracies and tricks depended on one's own strength in the end. It was like a 3-year-old child. No matter how good he was at scheming, it would be difficult for him to defeat a 20-year-old strong man. It's like this, Tiger's Mane said. Su He and Windchaser added on. The process of the matter was clearly shown in front of Yang Chendong. The Mongols of Gobi Desert suddenly launched a large-scale attack on Wandu. To the outside world, the reason was that they had betrayed the Mongols of Gobi Desert. They were here to seek revenge. Mu Ren, the general of Yundu, who had a guilty conscience and whose military strength was far inferior to the other side, wisely chose to leave and give up the city. After the news spread to the beginning city, Tiger's Man gathered the officers for a meeting. After discussion, they finally decided to take down Wandu City to reduce the threat that could threaten their existence at any time. After the decision was made, the corresponding military plan was carried out. The Independent Division was the main offensive force. Vice Division Commander Xen Honghai led 8 battalions and the 1st New Recruit Regiment to carry out the mission. On the left, the 1st Cavalry Regiment was the main offensive force. Regiment Commander Zhui Feng led the 1st New Recruit Regiment and the 2nd New Recruit Regiment followed. On the right, the Tatar Cavalry Regiment was the main offensive force. Regiment Commander Su He led the 3rd New Recruit Regiment followed. A total of 16,000 people launched a fierce attack on the city. Division Commander Tiger's Man would lead the remaining 8 battalions of the Independent Division, as well as Su Yunsheng's Reconnaissance Battalion and Logistics Battalion to stay behind. They would be in charge of the security of the city and the supply of the army. Even 3 new regiments were sent out. This in itself was enough to explain the problem. This was originally a training operation. It was to bring the new recruits to experience the atmosphere of the battlefield, so that they could adapt to this environment faster and better. It was just a Wandu city, facing the Mongol troops of the Gobi Desert who had been defeated by them again and again. No one put them in their eyes. And the facts also proved that it didn't take long to take down Wandu city. The army just charged and scared the enemy away and occupied the city. And all the changes began to happen from this moment. Just as the army occupied Wandu city and was cheering for victory, suddenly, one explosion after another sounded in the city, followed by flames that soared high into the sky. The unprepared mercenaries were hit head-on. The explosion and flames devoured their lives and disrupted their battle formation. After the event, the number of soldiers who were burned to death by the explosion was close to 5,000. Other than that, there were at least 2,000 soldiers who were injured or burned. The chaos didn't end there. After the explosion and flames, countless Mongol cavalry appeared from all around Wandu city. They fired their bows and charged forward like a tornado in the desert. Without any preparation, the soldiers didn't know their generals, and the generals didn't know their soldiers. In the chaotic battlefield, facing the sudden appearance of the Mongol cavalry, the mercenaries panicked. On the battlefield, there was a one-sided situation, and a one-sided massacre had begun. At this point, Tiger's Mane raised his head and looked at the silent Yang Chendong and said, "The generals are still very brave." Many of the soldiers who were burned took the initiative to take up the role of providing cover. For example, Gao Danhua, the 2nd Battalion commander of the 1st Cavalry Reinforced Regiment, was in the sea of flames. More than 40% of his body was burned, but he still raised his sword and led the soldiers to charge at the enemy. In the end, he died on the battlefield. In this battle, we lost 10,000 soldiers and more than 4,000 were injured. Young master, it's all my fault. I made a mistake in my command. Please punish me. At the end of his speech, Tiger's Mane knocked his head on the ground again and again. Soon, his forehead started to bleed, drop by drop. Enough. In the dull hall, Yang Chendong's roar finally came out. You are not sorry to me, but to the soldiers who died on the battlefield. Do you know how many families their deaths brought pain that can't be erased for a lifetime? With this roar, Tiger's Mane didn't dare to make a sound. He just lowered his head and cried. Wind-chasing Wolf and Su He, who were kneeling on the side, also looked very gloomy. This time, Hu Mang, who was the commander of the army, was mainly responsible. But as his deputy, he didn't stop it and didn't find the problem. He was also guilty. The room became quiet again. After Yang Chendong shouted, his chest kept rising and falling. It was obvious that he was really angry. Beta Persei saw all of this and was also very worried. He stepped forward and whispered, "Young master, take care of your body. It's bad for your body to be angry." Yang Chendong sighed and then waved his hand. "Forget it. This time, you are indeed responsible. But where did the fire come from? How did the Mongolian tribe in the north set you on fire? This is the main reason. Let me ask you, have you found out the reason?" Tiger's mane raised his head again, but the shame on his face was even heavier. This result seemed to be within Yang Chendong's expectations. He could also understand. After losing to such an extent, everyone was only thinking about how to defend the city. How could they have time to think about other things? He didn't say anything about it and just summed up this defeat. "The three of you are senior officers. Each of you will be recorded with a major demerit and your salary will be deducted for a year. If you commit the same mistake again, you will be removed from the military. Do you have any objections?" Tiger's mane and the other two couldn't help but tremble when they heard this. That was a major demerit. This was a very serious warning. According to the rules, if they committed the same mistake again within a year, they would have no chance to be in the military. However, compared to the soldiers who died, this result was not so hard to accept. Alright, I'll say it again. There is no such thing as a permanent victory in war. Since we lost today, we need to learn from our experience and not make the same mistake again. Now, let's think about how to raise the morale of the soldiers. Just now, you said that everyone's performance in the battle was not bad. Do you have any examples? Yang Chendong had already punished them. The dead could not be brought back to life. He had to continue his career. He couldn't just stop because of a defeat. Yes, there is. Tiger's mane raised his head and immediately reported what he heard and understood. A new idea began to form in Yang Chendong's mind with these reports. On the third day after Yang Chendong entered the origin city, his family also came to the origin city. Before they came, they had heard a lot about this city, but everything was just in their imagination. However, when they really entered this place, all kinds of exclamations naturally came out from their mouths. The origin city was naturally much worse than the capital of Baiming. It was even a little worse than the old city like Shen Mansion. However, after walking through the snow and seeing the vast white grassland, it was very difficult to see such a big city here. After only 2 days, the number of people on the streets of the city had begun to increase. The messenger of longevity heaven had returned. The god of war had returned. This was like a shot in the arm for everyone, allowing the people in the city to see hope again. If Yang Chendong's return was a kind of spiritual stimulation, then the compensation for the soldier's death that was distributed to the people in the past 2 days was real. They could see and feel the benefits. Under Yang Chendong's order, the treasury in the city was opened. More than half of the accumulated money was taken out to pay the families and relatives of the soldiers who died in the battle. When the real money was openly sent to the families of the Mongolian people by the mercenaries, the shock naturally appeared. The Mongolians were said to be a race on horseback because they had been in contact with the idea of the weak being prey to the strong since they were young. They paid attention to the strong being respected. The strong enjoyed everything and got everything. As for the weak, or even the dead, no matter how powerful they were when they were alive, they were just a pile of white grain after death. Just like Genghis Khan, he lived at the bottom for several years after his father's death. The strong enjoyed everything, and the dead turned into ashes. This seemed to have become an iron law on the grassland. But now, Yang Chendong had broken all the rules. The families of the dead soldiers received generous compensation in gold and silver. Although this couldn't bring the dead back to life, and couldn't make some people forget the joy of losing their loved ones, it was still better than not receiving anything. Especially when they received a lot. The dead soldiers each received at least 50 taels of compensation. Those who were officers would receive even more. Chapter 8:23. For this alone, the beginning city had paid 800,000 taels of silver. Such a huge figure was not something that other forces could afford. This move quickly stabilized the situation in the city, and the people in the city quickly felt grateful. Many people knelt down and kowtowed in the direction of the young residents in the city the moment they received the silver. The families of all the soldiers who had died received pensions. The complaints in the city disappeared, and there was a smile on people's faces. However, this was not all of Yang Chendong's means. Next, he announced that the award ceremony for the soldiers who had made meritorious contributions would be held in 3 days. At that time, the soldiers who had made meritorious contributions in this battle would be promoted in official positions and actual material rewards. As soon as the news came out, the people in the city were in an uproar. Didn't they lose the battle? How could there be rewards? It seemed that the scale was not small. What on earth was going on? Those who couldn't figure it out began to look forward to the so-called award ceremony that would be held 3 days later. Scattering gold and silver was Yang Chendong's contingency measure after he returned to the beginning city. Money might not be able to buy sincerity, but it could stabilize people's hearts and stimulate them. If it was supplemented by great benefits, it would definitely have an unimaginable effect. During these 3 days, Yang Chendong did not accompany his wives. He only instructed the teachers and students of the Yang Family Academy to walk around the city and take a look. He spent all his time on stabilizing the morale of the army. For example, he went to patrol the barracks, chatted with the soldiers to understand their psychological thoughts and movements, went to the hospital to visit the soldiers who were injured because of the battle, went to the homes of the people to comfort the families of the martyrs who had died, and so on. These actions allowed Yang Chendong to quickly gain the morale of the army and the public. The uneasiness in the city because of the defeat was almost suppressed by him alone. In the blink of an eye, the 3rd day arrived. Early in the morning, the largest square in the beginning city was surging with people. Under the strict protection of the army, the awards ceremony began. Just like before, the 2 carriages of shining silver tails were pushed to the center of the square. Yang Chendong once again put on his commander's uniform and walked up to the podium. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, names were read out one by one from his mouth. The young Mongolian men in brand-new military uniforms stepped onto the podium and personally received the War Hero medals from Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Xiaofeng, Windchaser, Lu Zhua, Su He, and Xan Honghai. They also received the military rank that only military officers could wear. They also received the heavy silver tray that made them bend down. In front of Yang Chendong, the young Mongolian man, Ba Tu, stood. In this battle, he joined the battle as a recruit. In the raging fire, he was not only not afraid, but also fought bravely with the cavalry of Maobei. He killed 2 enemies and rescued the injured battalion commander of the 1st Battalion, Deng Yu, at the critical moment. It could be said that he was one of the few people who performed very well on the battlefield. When Ba Tu's deeds were reported to Yang Chendong, he felt that there was something to be done in this matter. Finally, under his support and decision, he became a typical example among the recruits and stood on the podium of the award ceremony. Yang Chendong personally hung a 2nd-level War Hero medal on his chest. At the same time, he also gave him a 2nd lieutenant's military rank with 1 bar and 500 taels of silver as a substantial reward. Holding the tray in his hand, Ba Tu's face was red, and his face was full of smiles. Do well, I am optimistic about you. Like many leaders in later generations, Yang Chendong patted Ba Tu's shoulder to encourage him. It was these 7 words that made Ba Tu extremely excited. Until he walked past Yang Chendong and came to the podium that was equipped with loudspeakers and batteries, his face was still red and excited. Hello everyone. My name is Ba Tu, I am a native Mongolian. I grew up in a happy family. My father, mother, and sister accompanied me as I grew up. At that time, the sky was so blue and the water was so fertile. Even when it snowed in winter, the snowflakes were so pure and white. But all this happiness was disrupted by a sudden incident. That day, 4 Walla bandits came to my house, my father. Ba Tu was still talking about his strength on the podium. Yang Chendong and the others had already taken their seats in the first row of the podium. Sitting on his right was Beta Persei. Yang Chendong had already read the investigation about Ba Tuesday. He knew that he would be Beta Persei's future brother-in-law, so he took this opportunity to give him a chance. Now, it seemed that this person's performance was not bad. Seeing Beta Persei looking at him, Yang Chendong said softly, "Not bad, he did very well." "Thank you, young master, for your praise and for giving him this opportunity." Beta Persei was also very excited. Then he looked at Ba Tu, who was still on the podium, with a gratified expression. Although he and Kikij spent 2 days and 2 nights teaching him, it was undeniable that what he said was the truth, and it was also the most infectious for other Mongolians with similar experiences. To be able to achieve this effect, everything was enough. Beta Persei was not the only one who spoke. 2 other Mongolian soldiers who had made contributions in this battle also spoke. Their experiences were different, but the goal of the topic was the same. It was about the benefits of joining the mercenary army, and how their lives had changed after joining the army, and what kind of tempering their lives had been through. Hearing this, the people in the city who came to participate in this award ceremony were either excited, or had tears in their eyes, or this was a successful conference. After all the processes were completed, the last item of the conference was announced by Tiger's man. Just before the end of the conference, he announced the recruitment of new soldiers in the city, and it immediately received strong support from the people who attended the conference. Previously, Yang Chendong did not advocate the recruitment of soldiers because the resources in the city were limited. It was very expensive to raise an army, not to mention that the treatment of the mercenary army was so good. But in this battle, the losses were too great, so there were a lot of vacancies. Thus, there was a need to recruit soldiers. At the same time, this was also a way to tie everyone's interests together. Think about it, when every family had a mercenary recruit, wouldn't everyone's safety be tied together? It was really a case of, if one's glory is glory, then one's glory is glory, and if one's loss is also loss. A total of 1 to 200,000 taels of silver had been spent, and dozens of soldiers had been promoted to platoon leaders and deputy platoon leaders. This was the best example. Under the double temptation of money and glory, the new recruits' registration area in the city was immediately overcrowded. In the 4 months that Yang Chendong was not around, the total population of the beginning city had increased from the original 50,000 people to nearly 70,000 people. Among them, there were a total of 15,000 young men. However, it was still very easy to recruit 6,000 new soldiers from these people. As for the other sources of soldiers that were lacking, they would have to think about the logistics team. The logistics team was not only responsible for managing logistics. There were 2 very special units. One was the construction team, and the other was the prisoner camp. Their population alone had exceeded 10,000 people. They were all made up of prisoners who were captured in the war. The former was the reserve troops of the mercenary army that had surrendered, while the latter had not completed the transformation and had not completely surrendered. Choose 6,000 people from the construction team to reorganize into the army. Choose another 6,000 people from the prisoner camp to enter the construction team and continue the transformation. Tell them that as long as they perform well, they may be able to become a member of the mercenary army. If they don't perform well, they will work for the rest of their lives. Since Yang Chendong had spoken as the nominal leader of the logistics team, he took over this task and began to adjust. It had only been a few days since they returned to the beginning city, and the losses of the army from the previous battle had been replenished. Perhaps their combat power was not as strong as the previous mercenary veterans, but at least in terms of numbers, they had reached the same level as before. Even in terms of morale, there was not much difference. Seize the time to train. Let the new veterans get used to each other as soon as possible and meet the requirements of being able to go to the battlefield. After leaving these words to Tiger's mane and the others, Yang Chendong left the barracks outside the city and returned to the Yang mansion in the city. In the Yang Mansion, the director of the beginning City Security Bureau, Feng Liang, and the captain of the Langya Special Forces, Tai Hu, had been waiting here for a long time. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong coming back, the aura of the two people who were originally straight changed. They restrained their sharpness and lowered their noble heads. "You guys are here. Tell me, how is the investigation going?" Yang Chendong nodded to the two of them. Then, accompanied by his servant, Yang Si, he entered the side hall and sat down in front of the chair. Yang Si's body was very strong. He seemed to be seriously injured that day, but it was caused by excessive bleeding. Once he woke up after the blood transfusion, he quickly became lively again. Although his injuries were not completely healed, as long as he did not fight with the enemy for too long, there would not be any problems. After this incident, Yang Si admired Yang Chendong even more. He already knew that at the most critical moment, it was the young master who had transfused his blood to him. This was an extremely touching thing. The ancients were not like the modern people. They had received less education, and they knew even less about some things. In the eyes of many of them, blood was something that could save one's life. How could they casually give it to others? But the young master had done this. How noble was he? How lowly was he? Was it worth it for the young master to do this? He still remembered that after waking up, Yang Si was in so much pain that he wanted to die. He thought that it was his fault that the young master had transfused his blood to him. Later on, the doctor, Yuan Heping, explained a lot of things to him and said that human blood could be produced by themselves. As long as he did not bleed excessively, he could slowly recover. But from then on, he became even more loyal to Yang Chendong. Chapter 8:24. Yang Si stood beside Yang Chendong, less than 2 meters away. This was to ensure that no matter what danger occurred, he could step forward at the first moment and use his body as a meat shield to protect the young master's safety. Yang Chendong sat down and his eyes fell on Feng Liang and Tai Hu. As soon as he returned to the first city, he sent these two people out with only one purpose: to inquire about the actual situation of Wanda City and why the fire suddenly broke out in this battle. The explosion was easy to understand. Gunpowder could do it. And this kind of thing was not an exclusive secret. Baiming knew it, Nanming knew it, and the Mongolian tribe naturally knew it. However, it was winter now and there was snow everywhere. Yang Chendong could not figure out how the fire started. Feng Liang took the lead in reporting. "Sixth young master, we spent money to bribe a middle-level Mongolian tribe member and know these names, Agar Dorji and Fan Yuhai. In the last battle, our opponents were not only the Mongolian tribe of Mabe, but also these two enemies. However, the middle-level Mongolian tribe member did not know the exact number of their troops. He still needs time to investigate." After saying this, Feng Liang lowered his head. In this battle, the intelligence department did not follow up. Speaking of which, the Security Bureau was also responsible for the defeat. Originally, they thought that they could make up for their mistakes. However, it was obvious that Fan Yuhai had long been prepared for this. He actually said that he had 40,000 troops. At least, that was what the middle-level Mongolian man who was bribed said. Feng Liang was not a fool. Naturally, he would not believe it easily, let alone report this result. Therefore, he would rather be criticized than to find out the truth. When he heard the name Agar Dorji, especially Fan Yuhai, Yang Chendong, who was originally sitting there, could not help but frown. He had never thought that these people would mingle together. He knew that Agar Dorji wanted his son to marry Princess Tuya and wanted to form a marriage alliance with the Mongol tribe in the north of the desert. Logically speaking, the two sides should be enemies. But now, in order to deal with him, they had joined forces. It had to be said that there were no eternal enemies in this world, only eternal benefits. As for Fan Yuhai, this person was also an old enemy and belonged to the slippery kind. He did not expect that after fighting in the south, they would now meet in the north. It was really like the old saying, "Enemies do not meet." A thought flashed through his mind. He remembered these two people. Since he didn't know their actual situation, he shouldn't act rashly for the time being. He turned his gaze to Tai Hu. He had asked this person to investigate how the fire had started. Sixth young master, Tai, who is incompetent. We have not gotten the results yet, but it should be soon. We have more or less figured out the terrain of Wandu. Next, we only need an opportunity to figure out the cause. Tai, who had his head lowered, had a guilty look on his face. He always boasted in front of Yang Chendong. In his words, there was nothing in the world that their Wolf Fang special forces could not do. But now, the task had been handed in to him for 4 days, but there was still no clear result. He was ashamed. Well, then I will give you a few more days. I don't want to drag this matter on for too long. You can do as you see fit. Yang Chendong did not blame them. The current Wandu was not the same as before. There were many Mongolian cavalry stationed there. It was not easy to inquire about information there without being discovered. But he had confidence in the Security Bureau and Wolf Fang. These were 2 incomparably powerful fists. As long as there was enough time, they would definitely send back the results. Feng Liang and Tai, who left. Just from the way the 2 of them went out, it was obvious that they were holding back a lot of energy. It was conceivable that the next time they came to report, there would definitely be a result. Just as the 2 of them left, 3 women came in hand. They were the 2nd Madam Qiao Yin, the 4th Madam Lady Xiang, and the 7th Sister Yang Duo. It had been 3 days since they came to the first city. They had gradually become accustomed to the environment here, especially the greenhouse plantation outside the city. It was their favorite place to go. Not only was there green grass that was different from the winter snow, but the vegetables there were also the freshest. They were picked and made into delicious food. The taste was very good. The 3 of them came hand in hand this time to invite Yang Chendong to the greenhouse plantation. It was not that they were insensible. On the contrary, they wanted to use this method to persuade Yang Chendong to rest more. Otherwise, no matter how good his body was, he would still be exhausted. The 3 women's hospitality was difficult to decline. The main reason was that Yang Chendong had not spent much time with them. He owed them too much. In the face of such a request, he naturally could not refuse. He immediately said, "Then, I won't do anything today. I will accompany you to pick vegetables. We will make delicious food." Yang Chendong treated it as a hands-off shopkeeper, but the others were not so lucky. For example, the city lord, Yu Mian, was currently taking Wang Si, Yuan Heping, and the other teachers and students of the Yang Family Academy to tour the city and choose the location to build the school. Most of the first batch of students of the Yang Family Academy were now working in the first university of Red City. Every year, many outstanding students would graduate from there to fill the various positions that appeared in the expanding Yangxia. Building the second university in the first city was something that Yang Chenjiang approved after careful consideration. With the idea of cultivating backup forces, he thought that there should also be a university in the first city. Needless to say, the principal of the second university must be Wang Si. He asked Yu Mian to accompany him to choose an address. Once winter was completely over and it was time to break ground, a university would rise from the ground. Only when he came to the first city did Wang Si see Yang Chendong's great talent and great vision. How was this still a city? This was clearly the future prototype of a country. He remembered that before leaving the capital, his grandfather had told him that the strength of the Duke of Loyalty should be far stronger than what outsiders saw. At that time, he did not believe it, but now, the facts were in front of him, and he had no choice but to believe it. It was precisely because of this that Wang Si did not have any doubts. On the contrary, he was very excited. He knew that he had encountered a good era and an opportunity to let go of his hands and feet. Compared to the Ming dynasty that was already dull, decadent, tyrannical, and even filled with internal strife, everything here was so clear and attractive. The Ming dynasty advocated Confucianism and paid attention to the path of the sage. It seemed that as long as one could write a good essay, one could become a pillar of the country. In the past, Wang Si had also thought this way, and he had even done so. However, ever since he came into contact with the Yang family, which could be called a new learning, his attitude had completely changed. Originally, the knowledge in the world was not only limited to Confucianism. There were many more things that were worth learning and exploring. Knowledge was endless, and there was no end to learning. Ever since he fell in love with Yang Shui, Wang Xi had completely thrown himself into it, and what appeared in front of him was another world. Now that he was able to leave the capital and come to the origin city, it was equivalent to providing the Yang family with a strong enough soil. In addition, Yang Chendong rarely used people based on seniority. He had always used talents in a different way, and this made Wang Xi even more excited. He knew that the greatest opportunity in his life had come. As long as he could seize it, he would become someone like his grandfather, or even someone more powerful than his grandfather. For this goal, Wang Xi worked hard and did his best. The first step was to choose the location of the school. Both Yu Mian and Wang Xi were serious people. When they came together, they were naturally very careful in choosing the location of the school. Fortunately, there were too many open spaces in the origin city, and there were too many places to choose from. After just one day, the new location of the school was decided. Then, it was reported to Yang Chendong for approval. What kind of courses would be held in the new school, and who would be the preacher were the problems that the future principal, Wang Xi, would have to consider after all. Finally, there was a chance to show off their skills. This was a good thing for most of the students of the Yang Family Academy. In the future, they would not be confined by various rules. They only needed to follow their own thoughts and work hard to complete it step by step. If their performance was outstanding, there should be no problem with a golden path for them to walk on. One had to know that their teacher was loyal and courageous. With this, how could the students be afraid that they would not have a future? Of course, not every student was so excited. Just like Junko, one of the few female students, she was very conflicted at this moment. She left Baiming with the team. Along the way, she saw the different customs and environment of the Great Ming Dynasty. It let her know how vast the real Great Ming Dynasty was. It also let her know that her country was so small and weak. As soon as she arrived at the origin city, a new feeling once again refreshed her worldview and outlook on life. Although many of the people living here were not rich, their faces were full of happiness from the bottom of their hearts. Although some of them had just lost their loved ones because of the defeat, this did not break them down. On the contrary, many people thought that the reason why they lost the battle was because there was no god of war to command the battle. Now that the god of war had returned, they would still restore their history of winning every battle. Their future life would only be better. This kind of yearning for the future as well as a positive and optimistic attitude was very infectious even when Junko walked on the street. In contrast, her country, including her father and those ministers, only knew how to fight for fame and fortune in a small place. But in fact, how many people really cared about the lives of the people? Chapter 8:25. Everyone else was seeking change, and they were all getting better and better with each passing day. Where should Japan go from here? As a member of the royal family and a princess, Junko had to have some ideas. But at the same time, a choice was placed in front of her. Should she return to Japan now or stay here to learn more? Walking out of the capital of Baiming, Junko knew that she was safe. Here, Yang Chendong was the sky and the earth. As long as there was no order from him, no one would restrict her actions. That was to say, from the moment she stepped into the city, she had gained complete freedom and the right to choose. If she stayed, she should be able to learn more. She could see how the academy developed from nothing, how it grew, and how it combined what she learned with reality to benefit the country and the people. It could be said that this was a very good learning process. Once he learned it, one day when he returned to Japan, if he learned from it, he should be able to shake Japan, bring a new wind there, and strengthen himself. But would reality give her so much time? Junko asked Yang Chendong and knew that the advanced artillery that her father wanted had been passed to Japan. That was to say, the battle between the royal family and the general might start at any time. If that was the case, how could she still have the heart to stay here? She wanted to go back and help her father. Junko was troubled by whether to leave or stay for several days. But in the end, the honor of the country prevailed over everything. She finally made the decision to leave. As for whether she would lose the best opportunity to learn after doing so, she really couldn't care less. Junko came to the Yang mansion and said goodbye to Yang Chendong. She was received in the study. The study was an important place in the Yang mansion. Usually, even the two madams were not allowed to come here without permission. Just like when they were in the Yang manor, this was already an iron law. Generally, those who could be received in the study were important people. Junko was surprised to see Yang Chendong here. But thinking that she was going to leave, she didn't have so many thoughts in her heart. Yang Chendong was sitting at the desk, writing something. Feeling Junko's entry, he said without raising his head, "Wait a little longer. It will be done soon." Over the past 2 years, Junko had already gotten used to Yang Chendong's orders. She involuntarily complied and sat down on the chair placed in front of her. Then she sized up the study room. This was the first time she had entered this place. She saw many books on the bookshelves. Just by looking at the names, she could tell that many of them were not available outside. This could be seen from the gorgeous book covers. Yang Chendong didn't have to wait for long. He stopped writing, stretched, and turned to look at Junko. For a moment, their eyes met. Today, Junko seemed to have dressed up and put on some light makeup. Her skin looked very clean, and her face was also very clean. Coupled with her delicate facial features, she gave people a very comfortable and pleasant feeling. "Have you made your decision?" His eyes only stayed on Junko's face for a moment, then moved to her eyes and asked. "Yes." Facing such a gaze, even a somewhat burning one, Junko didn't know why she was a little nervous. She just answered and quickly lowered her head. Yang Chendong said generously, "If you want to leave, then leave. This is my promise to you. You don't have to be so evasive. You don't owe me anything. By the way, I just wrote something. If you really want to go back to Japan and build an academy, it may be of help." He actually wrote something for me? Doesn't that mean he has me in his heart? At this moment, Junko's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. It would be a lie to say that she didn't have any feelings for Yang Chendong. Just like how beauties loved heroes, this seemed to have become a common problem. No matter how strong a woman's heart was, she would always hope to find a stronger man to rely on and rely on. Not to mention that Yang Chendong was young and handsome, giving people the feeling that he was omnipotent. How many girls could resist such a man? Once upon a time, Junko's heart was filled with Yang Chendong's figure. She even made up her mind that as long as Yang Chendong asked, she would stay and accompany him forever. Even though she knew that Yang Chendong already had 5 wives, she still took the initiative to ignore this layer. Even if she was a country's princess and couldn't marry as a concubine, she still threw these fetters aside. Unfortunately, from the beginning to the end, Yang Chendong didn't take the initiative to ask her to stay. At most, he gave her a choice. This feeling finally made Junko give up the beautiful dream in her heart. She decided to leave. But now, when Yang Chendong's somewhat burning eyes looked at her, she found that her determination was still not enough. Her heart couldn't help but have other thoughts. "Thank you." After a long time, Junko finally opened her mouth. At this time, after a struggle in her heart, she finally made the decision to leave here. Compared with her feelings, as a princess of Japan, she was more worried about her father's foundation. This might be a kind of mission of being born in the imperial family. "You're welcome. You're my student." Yang Chendong smiled. He might not have noticed the change in Junko, or he might have noticed it, but he didn't want to say anything about it. "Yes, I'm his student." Junko suddenly smiled at this moment, then raised her head and looked at Yang Chendong, revealing a bright smile. "Thank you for taking care of me for so long. If possible, on behalf of my father, I welcome you to Japan. At that time, I'm willing to be your guide." "Definitely." Yang Chendong smiled. He had to go to Japan, but when that day came, he was afraid that not many people would sincerely welcome him. By the way, a battalion of soldiers will go out of the city the day after tomorrow. They will go to the sea town in the newer Gandusi area to receive the goods shipped from the sea. You can leave with them. Those soldiers will protect your safety along the way. "Thank you." After thanking him again, Junko didn't know why, but her heart seemed to be empty, as if something had dissipated. This made Junko, who was holding a stack of documents, walk out of the Yang mansion with a stunned expression on her face. Until she stepped out of the Yang mansion's gate, tears flowed down her face. She thought that maybe she would never see him again in the future. But what she didn't know was that they would meet again soon. It was just that at that time, it would be in a different way. Yang Chendong didn't show any discomfort with Junko's departure. This woman was very beautiful and smart. For a certain period of time, she really touched his heart, and he even had the idea of marrying her as a concubine. But his own ideals and mission made him not say those words. Even though he clearly knew that even if he asked her to stay now, there was still a high chance of success, he still didn't do that. She has her own mission after all. I just hope that she can be safe. When we meet again one day, maybe everything will come naturally. After sighing in his heart, Yang Chendong shook his head and temporarily put Junko's matter aside to consider the situation in Start City. The weather had begun to warm up, and the ice and snow also showed signs of melting. Once the grass began to grow again, spring would come for the tribes on the grassland. The newly grown water plants would be very beautiful, which was also the favorite and happiest time of the nights. Of course, it was also the time when war broke out. How to seize this opportunity to expand the influence of Start City and expand their territory in such a season became a practical problem in front of the mercenaries. Well, the necessary preparations are necessary, but before that we still have to deal with the enemies in Wanda City first. This is not only for revenge, such a large-scale enemy will not be allowed to exist near Start City. Yang Chendong was determined to occupy Wanda City. Previously, General Mu Ren was there and he cooperated with him. Of course, he couldn't attack directly. But now that it was changed to someone else, there was no psychological burden to occupy that place. What he lacked now was some understanding of the situation there. And this understanding was finally sent to Yang Chendong the next day. The ones who came to report were Feng Liang and Tai Hu. They knew very well what the sixth young master needed now. After the last report, the two began to work hard to infiltrate Wanda City. There were advantages of the coalition forces. For example, the force would be larger when they were together. The number of troops would be larger, and the combat power would be enhanced. But at the same time, there were many disadvantages, such as the chaos in management. Everyone served their own masters, and no one looked down on each other. It was precisely using this idea and gold and silver to pave the way. Soon, the Security Bureau bribed 2 middle-level generals and repeatedly verified from their mouths to get what they wanted. The first to report was Feng Liang, sixth young master. The situation in Wanda City has been figured out. The enemy's strength is nearly 60,000 people. Among them, there are about 28,000 people from the Mongolian tribe in Mabe, 15,000 people under Agar Dorji, and 15,000 people under Fan Yuhai. In the Battle of Wanda City, the mercenaries were ambushed and suffered heavy losses. But in that harsh environment, they still killed nearly 2,000 people and launched a counterattack before they died. From this point of view, the intelligence of the Security Bureau was very accurate. Sixth young master, our people have successfully infiltrated the city. We finally found out that the thing that caused the fire was crude oil. Oh, it's this thing. Tai Hu took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom. It was filled with crude oil that he had obtained from the city. Chapter 8:26. Crude oil. Yang Chendong raised his eyebrows and reached out to take the porcelain bottle. After opening it and smelling it, he nodded involuntarily. He had read about the so-called crude oil in some books before. This thing should be said to have been recorded as early as the Han Dynasty. It came out of the ground and was now known as crude oil. It was just that the people of this era did not know how to mine it or how to use it, so there were very few opportunities for it to be used in the military. Presumably, even the crude oil that caused the fire last time should have come out of the ground. It was the kind that could be easily obtained and used by the Mongolian army. If this was the case, then the combustion must be very strong. Everything was logical. So it's this thing. Have you found out where they got it from? Yang Chendong, who had more knowledge about crude oil, asked curiously. I've figured it out. This thing appeared in the low-lying area between Wanda City and Guangwu Town. Our people also went there to take a look. Although most of the crude oil has disappeared, if we look carefully, we can still find some. Tai Hu replied with his chest puffed out. It could be seen that this time they really put in a lot of effort and investigated everything very clearly. Is there still this kind of crude oil in Wanda City? Yang Chendong asked a question that he was very concerned about. I don't know yet, but please give us some time. We will definitely investigate it clearly. Tai Hu shook his head lightly and then asked for orders with a determined expression. It had only been 5 days since he had returned to the Holy Land. It wasn't easy to figure out the situation in such a short time. However, it was still impossible to fully understand the situation in Wanda City. Yang Chendong naturally understood this. He also knew that time was a little short, but he could not wait any longer. The mercenaries gave people the feeling that they were invincible and invincible. This was the reason why they were able to grow so quickly. On the other hand, if he lost again and again, no matter how much money he took out, there was no way he could restore the morale of his men. Of course, there was another more important reason. This time, someone had taken advantage of his absence to slap the mercenaries. If he did not return the favor, it would be hard to avoid rumors that would shake the morale of the army and would be looked down upon by the other forces. This was the main reason why Yang Chendong was so anxious to mobilize his troops. Be it the fact that the Mongol Alliance army had heavily injured the mercenaries or the fact that they were occupying the city and not leaving, it was a provocation. If he didn't show any reaction after a long time, who would take the mercenaries seriously in the future? Wouldn't the various legends that had been created in the past all be for naught? This was something he absolutely would not allow. However, in such a short period of time, he had made up his mind to fight because of the news delivered by Feng Liang and Tai Hu. Now that he knew the exact number of enemies in Wanda City and knew that there was a very flammable crude oil in the city, this was an opportunity placed in front of him. Yang Chendong was very good at grasping opportunities, and this time would be no exception. Pass down the order. All divisions and regimental commanders are to come to the Yang residence for a meeting immediately. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a bright light, and a bold plan had begun to form in his mind. After the 6th young master's order was passed down to the various battalions, the officers above the regimental level immediately rushed to the Yang residence. Soon, in the war room of the residence, all the officers stood there. They all puffed out their chests and looked at Yang Chendong, who was standing in front of the sand table with a calm and composed look. When all the regimental officers were present, Yang Chendong moved his gaze away from the sand table. At this moment, all the officers above the regimental level in the beginning city's military camp stood in front of him. They were the Independent Division Commander Tiger's Mane and Deputy Division Commander Xen Honghai, the regimental commander of the Fierce Tiger Regiment, Xiaofeng, renamed by Yang Chendong himself, the regimental commander of the 1st Cavalry Regiment, Zhui Feng, and the regimental commander of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, Lu Zhua, the regimental commander of the 1st Tatar Cavalry Regiment, Su He, and the regimental commander of the 2nd Tatar Cavalry Regiment, Shibi, the regimental commander of the Logistics Regiment, Beta Persei, and the battalion commander of the Reconnaissance Battalion, Su Yunxing, enjoyed regimental treatment. That's right. Shibi was the first regimental officer to be promoted on the front line. Unlike the others, even Tiger's Mane and Xiaofeng, who was standing there, were people who had climbed up step by step. However, Shibi had indeed been directly promoted to the position of regimental commander from among the fallen generals. Before this person could be said to be unknown, but now, he was known to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Shibi's ability and wisdom were only known by Yang Chendong, who had the deepest contact with him. This person even had the same ideas as Yang Chendong when it came to matters. He was originally a general in the Tatar army, and he was half Han Chinese. Yang Chendong naturally had to put such a person in an important position. Naturally, there were some disagreements about Shibi becoming the regimental commander of the newly established 2nd Tatar Cavalry Regiment, but this was the order of the war god, and no one dared to openly question it. Yang Chendong believed even more that as long as he gave the other party a chance to perform, it wouldn't take long for everyone to see his strength clearly. At that time, no one would have any doubts about Shibi's appointment. His gaze swept across every single one of them. At this moment, every single one of them had their chests puffed out, revealing a pair of tiger-like eyes, perfectly displaying their best mental state at this moment. Today, I called you all here for only one thing, and that is to attack Wanda City. There was no opening speech, not even any words to boost the morale of the soldiers. This was because Yang Chendong knew that everyone had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Sure enough, in the next moment, everyone's eyes were filled with excitement and excitement. For example, Tiger's mane and the others' faces were filled with killing intent. They had been waiting for this bloody humiliation for a long time. Very good. From your state, I can see that you all should be prepared. Since that's the case, I believe that there shouldn't be any problems. Now, I will announce the military order. In the war room, Yang Chendong issued orders one after another. The officers who were called by name stood at attention and promised to complete the mission. A large net targeted at Wanda City was unfolded. In a sense, now was not a good time to launch an attack on Wanda City. First of all, the organization of the regiments was not complete. Take the Tiger Regiment for example. Because they had to send a battalion the day after tomorrow to transport military supplies, their regiment should have 3,200 people after expansion, but now they only had 1,100 people. There was also the newly established 2nd Tatar Cavalry Regiment. They should have 3,200 people, but now they only had 2,000 people, which caused a lack of military strength. Secondly, even with the existing army, there were still the 6,000 recruits that had just been recruited, as well as the thousands of veterans from the construction team who had not yet fully adapted to the mercenary army style. Logically speaking, they should first unify the army and train them well before sending them to the battlefield. But in this way, it would take at least a month or two for them to complete their training, or even longer. Yang Chendong could not wait any longer. He did not dare to think about what the other grassland tribes would do if he could not display the powerful combat power of the mercenary army in a short period of time. He was afraid that at that time, he would not only have to deal with the 58,000 people of the Mo Bay Coalition Army, but also more. He could not wait. Moreover, sending troops now could also have an unexpected effect. Yang Chendong believed that they had a 60% chance of winning this battle. If they also had advanced weapons and were prepared in advance, this battle could be won. A series of orders were issued. All the officers did not doubt him. Although they knew that they were lacking in various aspects, this was the order of the God of War. They had to obey. From the fact that the God of War could not win without a battle, they also firmly believed that this time the victory would belong to them. The officers accepted the order and left one by one. In the end, except for Beta Persei, everyone left. Then the tall but cheeky Beta Persei came in front of Yang Chendong. "Young master, let's make a deal. Don't let our logistics team stay at home. I want to fight too." Yang Chendong's expression became much more serious. "Beta Persei, don't think that your logistics team's task this time is very light. Let me tell you, once the war changes, the safety of the entire beginning city will be in your hands." "Oh." Beta Persei was rejected and said listlessly. Beta Persei did not believe that the 6th young master would make a mistake. He was clearly comforting him. Yang Chendong seemed to have seen through Beta Persei's thoughts and shook his head. It was always difficult for him to harden his heart in front of the people closest to him. "Well, don't have any psychological burden. If we win this battle, do you know how many captives there will be? When the time comes, your logistics team will be busy. As for how to screen out useful talents from these captives to join the mercenary army, that will be your business. This matter is of great importance." Beta Persei's expression became much more serious when he said this. The number of people in the logistics team was not fixed. It might only be a few thousand people at a time, and it might reach more than 10,000 people at a time. All of this depended on the performance of the soldiers on the battlefield ahead and how many captives they could capture. How to make use of these captives was indeed a very important matter. In other words, The logistics team's function was not only to cook for the soldiers, provide various weapons and logistical support. At the same time, they also had the role of fresh troops and replenishment troops. Once a good seedling appeared and it was discovered that several regimental commanders were fighting over a captive, the distribution of the captives would eventually fall on him. This was a very popular job. Of course, this was also a very important job. Only the most trusted people would be placed in this position. Chapter 8:27. As soon as he thought of the sixth young master's trust in him, the grievance in Beta Persei's heart disappeared. Yes, young master, I completely obey your orders. You can rest assured that the logistics regiment will not let you down, but I can arrange for a deputy commander to guard the city for this battle. I can also follow you, young master, into battle. Yang Chendong once again rejected Beta Persei. This time, all the generals in the city who can fight have been sent out. You're the only one left. You can't leave. Otherwise, if something really goes wrong, it will be a big deal. Oh, I'll obey your orders. Seeing how resolute Yang Chendong was, Beta Persei also knew the principle of going too far and not going too far. There were some things that he could ask for instructions once, but he absolutely could not ask for instructions a second time. The battle meeting was over, and the barracks outside the first city began to quietly mobilize. In order to ensure that their military intentions were not known by the other party, all the members of the reconnaissance battalion were dispatched and sealed off 20 miles around the first city to ensure that no enemy scouts could approach here and spy on any changes in the mercenaries. Then, after a full day and night of preparation, on the second night, the divisions and regiments acted according to the plan. In the middle of the night, a large number of cavalry rushed out of the barracks and went straight to the city 200 miles away. Other than their own weapons, the cavalry did not bring anything else. Even the food on their bodies was only 5 days of dry rations, in order to ensure that their speed was faster. As a result, in the night, on the snowy ground, black shadows could be seen running quickly. In the season where the snow had begun to melt, the cavalry did not have to worry about falling into the snow when running, allowing them to exert their fastest speed. It was often said that a horse could travel 1,000 miles in a day and 800 miles in a night. That was unrealistic. Perhaps there were extremely special war horses that could do it, but this did not mean that it was possible. However, if they were to set off as soon as the sky turned dark, it would take them nearly 12 hours to reach dawn the next day. Traveling light and without any heavy supplies, it was still possible for them to cover 200 li in one night. When dawn broke, a large number of mercenaries with 5-starred flags suddenly appeared 20 li outside of Wanda City. They formed a fan-shaped encirclement, blocking the front and flanks. When the scout in charge of scouting outside the city saw this, he hurriedly returned to the city to report. When the cavalrymen in the city received the news, they immediately became restless. Only a small portion of the 50 to 80,000 cavalrymen had not been defeated by the mercenaries. Most of them had been defeated more than once. Suddenly, a large army of mercenaries appeared without any warning. It was easy to imagine how panicked they were at this moment. It wasn't just the soldiers, even Agedorji and Hararak, who had received the news, got up from their beds in a panic. They put on their clothes and rushed to the commander's residence in the city. By the time the father and son arrived, Sudra Khan was already seated in the hall, but his complexion wasn't good. It was obvious that he was frightened by the sudden news. What should we do? The mercenaries suddenly besieged the city. What should we do? Agedorji didn't wait for his but to sit on the chair and began to ask Sud for a plan. It was obvious that he was really panicking this time. Back then, he had nearly 50,000 cavalrymen, but they were still defeated by the mercenaries. Now, the entire Allied army only had a little more than 50,000 soldiers, and most of them were captured captives. Compared to the elites that he had brought, Agedorji didn't think that the Allied army would have any advantage in this battle. Don't worry, let's wait for General Fan. Seward was annoyed by the questions and pointed to the empty chair on the right. He really didn't have any ideas now. In his opinion, since the mercenaries took the initiative to attack, They must be prepared. He really didn't have any good ideas on how to deal with the enemy. He could only wait for Fan Yuhai to appear and see if he had any ideas on how to deal with the enemy. Agadorji noticed that Fan Yuhai hadn't arrived yet. His face couldn't help but sink. He coldly snorted and said, "What time is it now? Why isn't General Fan here yet? What is he doing? What is he doing? I'm afraid he still hasn't gotten up from that woman's belly last night." Hararok cooperated with his father. Then, a wretched expression appeared on his face. It was as if he had fallen into some kind of imagination. Sood helplessly shook his head when he saw the strange expressions of the father and son. As far as he knew, Fan Yuhai wasn't into this. At least during the time they were together, he didn't hear that Fan Yuhai had such a hobby. However, the mercenaries had already appeared outside the city. It was indeed strange that he hadn't appeared yet. The wait was always long. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Fan Yuhai, who was clad in armor, finally arrived. When he stepped into the hall, Hararaka's mocking voice sounded. "General Fan, you're so busy. I thought you would only appear after the enemy breached Wanda City." Fan Yuhai didn't stop as if he didn't hear the mocking voice. He walked to the chair on the right and nodded to Sood and Agadorji as a greeting. As for Hararok, who didn't even have a seat and had to stand to talk, Fan Yuhai didn't even look at him. It was as if he didn't exist. This time, Hararok was furious. The feeling of being ignored made him angry. He wanted to continue mocking Fan Yuhai, but at this time, Sood said, "General Fan, you know about the mercenaries outside the city, right? Do you have any countermeasures?" "Just now, I went to the city wall to take a look. It was indeed mercenaries outside the city. Moreover, this time, the war god came personally." Fan Yuhai nodded. The reason he came late wasn't because he was lazing in bed, but because he went to the city wall first to understand the situation. Sood nodded in satisfaction when he heard Fan Yuhai say that he understood the situation. This was what a general should do. He wasn't a petty person who only knew how to stand there and mock others. Once on the battlefield, he wouldn't be of any use. It was just that the war was imminent, and this thought only flashed through Suda's mind. When Suda heard that Yang Chendong had also come, he asked in a daze, "War God is also here. Are you sure?" "Yes, the flag that belongs to the war god has been raised. Since he is in the grassland, there's no reason for him to not come out." Fan Yuhai didn't have a telescope, so he couldn't see that far. However, based on his intuition, he believed that this old opponent must be among the mercenaries outside the city. Seeing that Fan Yuhai was so sure, Sood's expression changed again. "Even the war god is here. I think they must be determined to get Huan City. What should we do?" "Of course we fight." Fan Yuhai blurted out as if he was talking about an extremely ordinary thing. Indeed, the mercenaries appeared so quickly. It had only been 7 days since the last defeat. They had made a comeback, which was indeed a bit beyond his expectations. In his opinion, after suffering such a heavy blow, the most important thing to do was to conserve energy and guard against them attacking the beginning city. Why would they take the initiative to attack others? However, the war god was the war god. His actions were always so unexpected. It had to be said that the sudden appearance of the mercenaries also caught Fan Yuhai off guard. Even now, he still couldn't figure out what the war god was thinking. However, not understanding the other party's thoughts didn't affect his decision to fight. "That's the war god we're talking about. Can we defeat him?" Agadorji opened his mouth, but his words weakened his own morale. It was obvious that he was really afraid of this person. This time, Sood didn't stop Agadorji from saying such words. In fact, how could he not be worried? He had lost 2 battles with the war god. At the worst, he was chased for thousands of miles until he fled to the northwest of the Inma River. All of this was enough to prove his thoughts. Why can't we beat him? The war god is also a human. He will also be injured if he is hit by an arrow. A saber can also take his life. Speaking of which, he is no different from us. Moreover, our military strength is clearly several times greater than the enemy's. In addition, we are in charge of defense, while they are in charge of offense. This makes it impossible for the muskets to display their greatest advantage. Fan Yuhai stated his decision and the basis for it. Then his gaze fell on Suda. Obviously, he wanted this person to make the final decision. Su didn't immediately answer Fan Yuhai's question. Instead, he turned his gaze to Agadorji and asked, "Lord Agadorji, what do you think of this matter?" Agadorji wanted to express his opinion, but Fan Yuhai beat him to it. Lord Agadorji, we can't hesitate anymore. If we only think of running away because of the appearance of the mercenaries, when will we be able to defeat them? Moreover, in the last battle, we have already proven ourselves and proved that the mercenaries are not invincible. If we retreat without fighting this time, I'm afraid that we won't have the chance to win in the future. Are we going to live a life of hiding in the future? Are we going to live like rats in the dark for the rest of our lives? Fan Yuhai had to interrupt. Otherwise, once Agadorji expressed his opinion, there would be no need for this battle. He was afraid that they would really have to retreat. He had long heard that the Mongols ate meat while the Central Plains people ate grass. The grass eaters couldn't beat the meat eaters. However, when he came here, Fan Yuhai realized that the reality was not as he had imagined. Everything was reversed. The once glorious grassland cavalrymen were so scared that their legs turned to jelly when they heard the name of the mercenaries. They were already scared before the battle. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.